I'm excited to share this morning the third part of our series, walking through the book of Daniel. Has anyone here enjoyed the series so far? Yeah? Has anyone here in a small group? Put your hands up if you're in a small group. Look at that. How awesome is that to see so many people that are in a small group? If you aren't in one, there are still ways that you can join one. And we're also going to do some more again in our next series. At the end of this 6-week section, we're going to take some time off. Then we're going to start a new series in the new year, and there'll be another opportunity to join some small groups then. Then there might be another small break, so we're not going to be overwhelming us, and we will have another opportunity to join some small groups. So don't fret if you feel like you're missing out. Come and talk to myself. I'm the only Lyndon as well, but we're really the only other pastors here. Find an elder, and we're happy to get you into one. Otherwise, feel free to look out for another opportunity to join one in our next series. This coming weekend, we start rebuilding the family altar. You might notice a theme in everything that we're doing. And rebuilding the family altar is a week of prayer, but we're not going to be coming to church. You're going to be doing it in your homes. I'm creating some resources, and there's already some other resources that you can watch for 4 minutes, get a devotional thought, and then there's an activity for you to do in a family, with you, whether they're old or young, whatever it is, you can take part in that. And also, if you want to get involved and answer some questions, send me a message. I'd love for you to answer some questions on video so that we can have some participation going on as well. I've already got some people that I know have or are recording some parts. It's going to be super duper exciting. I can't wait for that as well, to get into the Bible with your kids, with your teenagers, with your young adults, or if you're here and your parents aren't here, to get in the Word with them as well. Very, very cool. So, Daniel chapter 3. Over the past 2 weeks, we've discovered in this journey that God is faithful, even in the midst of chaos. Even in the midst of one's identity being taken away, God is there. Even last week we discovered that God is going to set up a kingdom, right? And does his kingdom last for a little time, or does his kingdom last forever? Forever, right? There's a kingdom that is coming that is going to last forever. And I want you to keep that in your mind, because last week's sermon links directly into what we are talking about today. You see, King Nebuchadnezzar did not want to accept the plan that God had for him. You see, as we go through the book of Daniel, we see that we, in the first one, discover that God is the God who is in control, and he's the one who gives. And then there's Nebuchadnezzar's dream, where he is told point blank that your kingdom, King Nebuchadnezzar, your kingdom is going to fail. The kingdom after that, and the kingdom after that, and the kingdoms after that, and there's only one true kingdom, and that's God's. But God seemed to have a plan for Nebuchadnezzar, didn't he? Why else is all of this happening, right? God has a plan for Nebuchadnezzar. And at the end of Daniel chapter 2, what does Nebuchadnezzar do? Does anyone want to try and answer that? What does he do? Does he change in any way? Nebuchadnezzar recognizes that the God of Daniel has something special. He's the only one that could reveal what Nebuchadnezzar had dreamed. There's something going on here when Nebuchadnezzar notices that God has something special. You would think that Nebuchadnezzar would respond by maybe accepting God as the Most High God. But no, Nebuchadnezzar decides to go harder. Nebuchadnezzar decides that he has his own plan. Have you ever, in your story, been walking through life and looked at God's plan for you and looked at your own plans and maybe decided that your own plans need to take precedence? We as humans, we inevitably try to take control over our situation, right? We might feel scarcity in that we just don't have enough, so we try to take and keep what we have and hold it all here. we might live in fear of control. And so we're constantly trying to take control of all the things that are going on around us. But church, I have learned that even my best laid plans are nothing in comparison to what God has for you or for me. We as humans, we love making plans. If you're in the business world, you make a 3-year plan and a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan, and then they change, and then they change again, right? And they change again. We constantly are looking forwards. In Australia, research shows that we are amongst the worst in the world at making plans. We say, yeah, nah. And we say, nah, yeah. All right? We're very non-committal. We just don't want to commit to a plan. Myself as an introvert, if I know there's plans coming up, I'm not going to commit to them until I absolutely need to. In work, I do commit to everything. But in life, right, if there's I just had to make that clear, I've got a good work ethic. But my natural way is I don't want to commit. And I think Australians on the whole, I know Australians on the whole, according to some very good research that has been done over the years, our culture is one where even in business, we just don't want to commit. Why is that? Do we want control? Maybe as a society, we are just shell-shocked and we're just not sure what's coming next, and so we just can't plan. I think it's even more true over the last few years, right? Even our best laid plans fall away. They just don't happen. So now what's the point in making plans, right? Just go with the flow. But God has a plan. So today, we're going to see how God has a plan. Not just for Daniel's 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who are the stars of our story, but also for Nebuchadnezzar, and also how God has a plan today for you. So we're going to try and bring it home to you. Is that cool? All right, let's go. So we're going to start off by going through 4 parts. This will be the whole sermon, actually. We're going to go through worship. We're going to look at who is in control. We're going to look at the challenge that occurs in the story. We're going to ask the question, who's your God? All right? Who's your God? And we're going to have a look at the reaction and what the response to God's faithfulness is, and then we're going to apply it to you and look at how God delivers today. So let's get into it. Let's look at worship. What on earth is worship? Worship's a really interesting thing in that we as humans all inevitably worship something. We inevitably worship something. If we look at our world today, every single business is taking on spiritual elements into the way they advertise and the way that they communicate, because we want to have our needs met. Has anyone heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs before? Right? And in those Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we need certain things. We need things like safety, psychological safety. We need to have these things met, otherwise we struggle. And so whether you find that in religion, or you find that in Christianity, or you find that somewhere else, we are all going to ultimately search for meaning, purpose, and hope somewhere. We all need it. There's businesses out there now who market in a way that give you meaning. They want to give you purpose, and they want to give you hope that their product is going to solve whatever's going on for you. So let's have a look. Daniel chapter 3, and I'm going to have this one open if you've got your book. If you don't have one of these and you'd want one, come and see me at the end and I've got some left and I can give you one, all right? So Daniel chapter 3, we're going to go to verses 1 through to 7. And it says, now remember context, what had just happened in the previous chapter? There was an image and the head was gold. All right. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold. Is that ironic? I find that sentence so ironic. Whose height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. And King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather together the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges and magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces of Babylon gathered together for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time that you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, and the psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning, fiery furnace." So at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, and the lyre, in symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. There's a few things I notice in this story. There's a lot of stuff that's going on. There's this music, right? There's this music that's happening. And it's not just Hebrew music. There's Greek music, these instruments. There's music from all kinds of nations that Babylon had captured. And we understand that music has something to do with worship these days. It's not just that, but all the people in the kingdom, all the officials had been told that they must bow down for this image. The other thing I want to note here, there's a dedication that takes place. Does anyone remember in Ezra? In Ezra chapter 6, verses 16 to 18, when the temple is set up, the temple is dedicated and consecrated in a ceremony. And I kind of see what's happening here is as King Nebuchadnezzar is dedicating himself, the image of himself, as something that should be worshipped. I think there's things in our world today that maybe we have dedicated as something that we can worship. Our society has said that it's okay to worship self. Our society has said that there's things that go on that it is entirely okay to worship. So where and what do you worship today? Who is in control of your life? Because in this story, King Nebuchadnezzar is exerting control, right? He is exerting control as a result of what has happened previously over his kingdom and over his people, that he is going to set up a kingdom that shall last. God has said, your kingdom shall not last. King Nebuchadnezzar says, my kingdom, I'm going to make it last. So, let's look at the characters in the story as we get going. We've got King Nebuchadnezzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Does anyone here remember VeggieTales? My generation in particular, we watched a lot of VeggieTales. At least I did, and in my context. And this one here is my favorite of them all. It's the King Nebuchadnezzar story, right? The fiery furnace story. But it was told about a bunny, a chocolate bunny. And it was Rack, Shack, and Benny. So if you ever hear me refer to them as Rack, Shack, and Benny, you know what has influenced me in that direction, all right? But I found this story both enthralling as well as a little bit scary, right? In that they told the story in such a way that resonated with me as a kid, that showed me that it's not just about peer pressure, but whenever there's force in any relationship, it's devoid of God. That's what it taught me. Whenever there's force in a relationship, it is devoid of God, because God will not and does not force you to love him. I want you to notice that. God does not and will not force you to love him. That's the whole crisis that's been going on in the great controversy. God will not force Lucifer or Satan to get into line. Satan wants to exert his control and force not just over God, but over your heart. God will never force you. So who is in control? because this head of gold became the whole image, and Nebuchadnezzar was taking control over his kingdom. He demanded pure loyalty. And whenever I hear of loyalty, I realize that there is a kingdom that is doomed to fail right there and then. If there's force, as I said, it is doomed to fail. A kingdom that is doomed to fail demands absolute loyalty. Do we see any kingdoms like this today on earth? Yeah? Anyone want to throw something out? Anyone want to throw something like if we look around the world, we can look at nations, right? Where there is control. North Korea is isolationist, right? There is absolute loyalty that is demanded. When there's absolute loyalty that is demanded, that's a problem. We look around in the world, we can see nations that are like this, but I'm going to wager we can see people who are like this as well. In any group. I'll use the church for an example. Don't we like that? The church. In the church, we end up with problems where there's isolationism that goes on, there's domination and there's purification. Isolation is when we're going to block everything out and only listen to ourselves. That's a cult. They isolate everyone from any outside influence and say, we have the full truth. That is a mode of force. Domination. Where one group of people come in and say, I'm going to dominate my ideas over everyone and force them upon everyone. And that everyone that follows this is going to believe the same way that I do. And if you don't, you're out. Is there force there? Yeah. You either get with or you get out. What about purification? What do you think that looks like? That is when one group of people says, if only we got rid of them, everything's going to be okay. If only we get rid of the people that believe this way, we're going to be fine. Is that doomed for success or failure? I think that's doomed for failure because we can't exist without one another. When we have purification, what's going to happen is they might get rid of that group and then it's just going to happen over again. They'll find another issue to purify themselves over and they'll find another issue to purify themselves over and so on and so forth until it's just, again, about loyalty and domination and force. I see this happen in human relationships time and time again. And I've even seen it happen in churches, I've seen it happen in all kinds of organizations. If we just got rid of them, we're going to be fine. So there's kingdoms that are doomed to fail. And I think King Nebuchadnezzar, the moment he set up the image of himself and demanded loyalty, his kingdom was doomed to fail. And so there's a battle for worship that's upon our heroes. The ceremony that takes place, how many people did it require to attend? Everyone. Everyone had to be there. Everyone had to worship the king. Everyone had to bow down before this golden image at the sound of the music. This ceremony, it's not just a political ceremony. It's also a religious ceremony. In Revelation 13, in that chapter in Revelation 13, we're going to unpack that soon, so I'm not going to go there and spend much time. In Revelation 13, the issue isn't over something physical. The issue is over worship and who we choose to worship. And today, church, people are searching for all kinds of things to worship. You might be worshiping a brand. Maybe you're worshiping your work. Workaholism is on the rise as well as burnout is on the rise. Just this week, I don't want to get into the current events too much, but I want to make it real for you. Just this week, people in an organization in America were told you need to be hardcore and work more. And the people have said, we're out then. We see this all the time where there's a demand to do more, to be more, to worship something outside of God. we see here that if the king doesn't receive the worship he expects, he'll die through fiery trial. So, let's look at what happens. The battle lines are drawn and a challenge is upon us. It's not just any sort of battle. This is a battle over the hearts and minds of the people here in this story. It is a battle over worship. Remember, worship, we're looking at your innermost needs. We're looking at something outside of yourself with hope. So have a look. Daniel 3, 8 through to 12. This is what it says. It says, therefore, at a certain time, the Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. They spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, and the psaltery in symphony with all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the gold image. It's been decreed, it's been forced. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you, king, have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Rakshak and Beni. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image you have set up. So there's a battle taking place over worship, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stand accused. Is there anyone else, if we think of the Bible, who stands accused? The Jews tried to accuse Jesus. Satan is accusing us. But Jesus has said it right. But Satan wants to accuse us and wants to accuse God. He wants to put God on trial to try to prove that God is not love. God sent Jesus to prove that he is love. And God will save those who choose him, and it will prove that he is love. Pretty cool, right? So the boys, they stand accused as this battle is taking place. So my question for you: could you stand for God in this sort of circumstance? I want to place yourself in the story. Could you stand for God, right, in this circumstance? A king has said, you are going to burn if you don't follow me. We've seen examples of this today. There's people who have stood for God against all kinds of horrible people, and they've been killed for it, even today. It's real. It's something that is a present issue. People still have to stand for God daily. In Australia, we're lucky. Our forefathers fought, our Adventist forefathers fought for religious freedom in our Constitution. That's pretty cool, right? The Adventists got that for Australians. Yeah, that could be under threat, but I don't want to be a scaremonger about it. But what I'm saying is that we have a call to stand for God like these three boys. Let's keep on reading because there's something really, really interesting that happens here. Verse 13. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they brought these men before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up? Now, if you are ready, standing over them, at the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, and the psaltery. Notice the repetition again. In symphony with all kinds of music, and you fall down and worship the image which I have made good. Notice the king here. What has he made good? He's made the image good. Who else makes things good in the Bible? Who? God alone makes things. God made you good. He created you. And he said it was very good. Only the Creator, God alone, can make something good. A king with a stony heart can't make an image good to worship. It's impossible. Which I have made Good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hand? Sarcastic question. Who is the God, boys, who's going to deliver you from my hand? There's a song in that VeggieTales, The Bunny. Does any of you guys remember that song, The Bunny? No? Michaela does, because we spoke about it last night. As a kid, I remember hearing that song, and it's like, you're going to worship the bunny? You're going to worship the image. You're going to have to, because your God can't save you. Your God can't save you, King Nebuchadnezzar says. And so here we see this battle line get drawn ever more. The sovereignty of God is being challenged by this human king. God's sovereignty is on trial here in Babylon. And it continues. And the boys, they answer him. Let's read verses 16 onwards. It says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that was the case, our God, whom we serve, is able. Our God, who we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image that you have set up. I love this. Even if we die, we're not going to worship the gold image that you have set up in the place of God. Today, I think our hearts can be so easily distracted from God. Our eyes can be so easily taken off what he has done on the cross for you. Our eyes can be taken off what God has achieved throughout eternity for you. He made you. He is your creator, and you are his image bearer. No other thing is like that. We were designed as God's image bearers to worship God, as people who are made very good, not to worship any other image. So it continues on. Verse 19, then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that the heat of the furnace be made 7 times hotter than it was usually heated. Commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the fiery furnace. Do you believe, church, that God can deliver you? Yeah. I believe that my God can deliver me. Even from a fiery furnace. God has delivered me from the grips of Satan. He has delivered you if you choose him. In the lesson this morning, you might have gone to 1 John 5, 11 through to 12, right? Where it says that if you have the Son, you have life. There's already a promise in there that he is faithful and he comes through on his promises. So they had trust in God despite the circumstances as they were cast into the furnace. So what is trust? Because we use that word, but none of us actually truly understand what it means. Trust is, she's according to Brené Brown, and she's not necessarily the final definition on things. The Bible is. This is what she says. She defines it this way. She says, trust is choosing to risk making something you value vulnerable to another person's actions. Is that true? Is trust choosing to make yourself vulnerable to your lifelong partner, right? In marriage, right? We make ourselves vulnerable to our partner in both directions equally. We become vulnerable. We grow one another. That's the beauty of it. Trust is choosing to risk making something you value vulnerable. And so here, were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego vulnerable? Were they vulnerable? I think they were vulnerable. They were about to be cast into a fiery furnace. They trusted God with their lives. Oh, So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had chosen to trust God no matter the outcome, as you read there. No matter if God doesn't deliver us, we still trust him. Even if things go wrong, we still trust him. Even if this world is broken, we still trust him. Job, this is my favorite example of trust. In Job chapter 13, verse 15, it says, "Though he slay me, yet I will hope in him. I will surely defend my ways to his face." Remember the way Job was thinking, right? He thought it was God that was doing this to him. And he said, even if God is doing this to me, I still trust in him. I still trust in God because I know God is love. God is love. It continues now back in the book of Daniel. These men were bound in their coats and their trousers and their turbans and their other garments and were cast into the midst of the fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of fire was so hot that it kills those men who had taken up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the furnace?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." "Look," he answered, "I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." They're unharmed in the furnace. Who was present? The Son of God. The Son of God walked through the fire with these boys. Their trust came through, and God could deliver them from something that is impossible. You might be facing challenges in your life today that just seem impossible. God has already delivered you. If you've chosen him, you have eternal life. They're perfectly unharmed. It's literally a fulfillment of Isaiah 43, where it says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire," I made a typo there, "when you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze." The flames will not set you ablaze. They had turbans, they had coats, they were bound, and they were fine. So, can God deliver you? If Jesus was physically present here, surely the king is going to make a change in his heart, right? Surely something is going to change because he has witnessed a miracle where Jesus himself was present. Something that was impossible, that had killed, remember, his great men of valor. This is what it says in verse 26. We're going to see the reaction. The flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down in the midst. And then it says in verse 26, as he saw them coming through, he said, "Look, Son of God's there." Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and he spoke, saying, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." And then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire. The satraps, the administrators, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together. Who was present at the beginning of the story at the image? These same people, right? They've witnessed a miracle of God. The whole leadership of Babylon has witnessed something go down. They saw these men whose bodies the fire had no power over. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of the fire was not on them. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. And they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God, Therefore, I make a decree that any nation or language or people that speaks anything amiss of the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God that can deliver like this. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Notice that he says, blessed be the God. In other translations, he says, the Most High God. The Most High God. Who's the Most High God, church? Our God, right? The king had witnessed the supremacy and the sovereignty of our God. Now, he did say that he's going to cut anyone into pieces who says anything against. So he hasn't quite fully got this idea straight yet. But he recognizes that God is the Most High God, the only God who can deliver. Church, I want to tell you today that your God, my God, is the only God that can deliver you from the grips of this world. He died on the cross to deliver you. And the God who delivered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we're going to discover in a couple of weeks, can also deliver Daniel. Our God can bring about an about-face in a king whose heart, in my view, was made of stone. He was stubborn. He always wanted to put himself first. Yet God can bring him around. They could have caved to the demands at any moment, but they were not ashamed and they stood firm. Do you understand God's power, church? Because in Romans chapter 1 and verse 16, this is what it says. It says, this is Paul speaking, for I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone, to believers, first to the Jew, and then to the Gentile. If you believe, he brings salvation. How cool is that? And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they believed and they were saved from a fiery trial. If you just believe. When we're faithful to God, church, when we are faithful to God, he finds a way to give us a more potent platform to share his gospel. That final verse of chapter 3, this is what it says. It's hiding right just at the top of the next page. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. God came through, saved them from a fiery trial, and gave them a platform upon which to share God from. And I can tell you, I don't have time to tell you the stories, but I can tell you that when I am faithful to God, even in the midst of situations that I don't think I really could be, He enables me and He uses me to share the gospel more. There are people who have chosen God because of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There are people who will choose God because you will be faithful to Him. Because you are faithful to Him. Because I am faithful to Him. So what about today, church? I think that God desires your praise and worship. When I look at this story, and the boys were faithful to God. And He came through for them. And because when we worship Him, He will then make us more effective when we choose Him. When we choose Him, He will make us more effective in His service. And the God that delivered the three can deliver you today. Let me repeat that. The God that delivered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego can deliver you today from whatever you are struggling with. Is God, church, the center of your worship? Are you worshiping a brand? Are you worshiping yourself? There's many things in our world that we worship. There's many things that we focus our attention on. But I want you to prioritize God. So my challenge for you today, be like Rakshak and Benny. Make God the center of your worship. Make God, our sovereign God, the center of your heart, the focus of your attention. Our attention can go all kinds of places today. On your phone, each week it might tell you how much attention you gave to the screen, right? Always a bad reminder. Hey, that's where my attention is. I want your God time to be greater than your screen time. I want your God time to be greater than whatever else is going on in your life, to be more potent, to be more important. Might be joining a small group. It might be making a whole life change. You might be getting more involved at church. Whatever it is, I want you to place God, the God who died on the cross for you, at the center of all that you do. Because by doing that, that'll place God at the center of our church, which then means that we are going to be way more potent, way more powerful, way more able to share the gospel with countless people here in our community. That's what I want for our church. We're already doing it, and I want us to be able to do it more effectively. So church, as we sing this song, I want you to make God the center of your worship today.
I just wanted to invite you to stand and sing with us.